audio recording of the meeting will be available on the council website.
Thank you very much, Helen. We're all ready. Let's start on agenda item number 1, please. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
I have apologies from Sean Redgate.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda, to approve as a correct record of the minutes held on the 28th of January 2020. Is there any issues to be raised with them, or is everybody happy with them? Yeah. Thank you very much. Item number 3, any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Item number 4, report from Service Manager David Archer. David?
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce the standard information report, the report to do with the sickness absence. It has been a little while since we met last, hasn't it? So I guess a bit of an update might be due. And I think quite a lot of things have happened since we last met as well. You'll recall that the target for the organisation in terms of sickness absence is 9 days lost per full-time equivalent employee. Currently, we're running above target, so you'll see about 9.85 days. What I've tried to do is include some information about the obvious, really, which is absence due to COVID or COVID-related absence. And I suppose, in some ways, no surprise, really, that if we think about lockdown when it started towards the end of February time, looking at the absence rates back in March, 21% of our absence was due to COVID-related absence. So that's employers relaying to us, I suppose, that they had conditions that were similar to the COVID infection. As far as we're aware, we've had no positive results, and in terms of people that we've sent for testing. So although people were absent because of an illness they thought could have been to do with COVID, no confirmed cases. You'll see that the absence rates decreased through April, May and June, but still overall absence rates do run high. You'll see from the information containing the report that there are actually quite a number of long-term cases as well. Now, again, sometimes those cases are things we can't do too much about, but what I would say as well is that although we have resumed now the case management conferences between directors and service managers and line managers, for a length of time, because of the lockdown arrangements and I suppose the Teams meetings being in their infancy, then the case management meetings were something that fell by the wayside for certainly 2 or 3 months. And those are conferences are things that are quite useful normally, where we get some input from HR as well. So more of an active management of longer term cases. So to reassure you that those case conferences have restarted again. There was a period when they fell by the wayside. The report this time also includes analysis of reasons for absence over the last financial year. So that information is included page 15, appendix 2. So the 3 reasons, I suppose, by proportion that have been most prevalent over the last year. First one, which has been the case for a number of years now, is absence due to anxiety and depression. That's not necessarily work related, but it is anxiety and depression, and then post-operative recovery and also back problems as well. So a little bit unfortunate in terms of timing. We had quite a program of work in place to offer training to team members and to managers in relation to dealing with mental health. So I suppose training sessions are focused at employees looking to support their own good mental health, but also sessions separate to that to managers to help them to support their team members who were perhaps suffering from mental health problems. Those haven't taken place. It's likely they'll take place for certainly this calendar year and possibly into spring The sessions were going to be run on a sort of a physical basis, face to face. I'd like to think that those things would still go ahead. However, in the interim, and it was a session that we've run today with a supplier, we are able to identify provision for perhaps a shorter sessions to be run over Teams. So rather than it being sort of mental health training, it's probably mental health awareness. And as I say, we've reviewed a package today that will be pretty cost effective, that we can probably get out to all people with an email address across the council, but also people in our leisure teams, in our waste teams, in our parks teams that don't have an email address, a council email address at least. And that short program can also be accessed by them remotely through their own devices, so smartphones, for example. So we're pretty hopeful we're getting that off the ground quite quickly. It doesn't mean that it's the be all and the end all, but it will be some additional provision for all employees at least. The second reason for absence in terms of prevalence over the year was to do with musculoskeletal problems. Sorry, beg your pardon. Post-operative recovery. Again, there are sometimes things you can do to support people to return to work in a safe but quicker way. Often it's a question of waiting out. I mean, obviously, post surgery, it is quite limiting. So I would say, yeah, there are things we can do that will be supportive in nature, but not necessarily things that would allow us to perhaps make much of a change there. The absences relating to back problems, you'll recall that we did introduce a fast-track physiotherapy service some time ago. So although it remains as still a reason for absence at high rate, back problems, the problems to do with musculoskeletal issues reduced quite substantially between this year and the year before. So some success there. So the report's just presented for information, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, David. Is there any questions for David on item agenda number 4? Councillor Wilkinson's got a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for your report. I think we've probably all expected it to be absent to be higher at this time, given what we've been through. I was just wondering, out of interest, whether you've got any information on, in terms of the COVID-related absences, of what proportion related to members of staff actually being ill or suspecting they were ill themselves, and those who were required to self-isolate because they'd been in contact or potentially been in contact with somebody who had COVID, or in somebody in their household.
Okay. So the information in the report does relate specifically to people who would have displayed symptoms. So we're reporting sick. As I say, we've yet to experience a positive test for COVID, but the people were absent because of symptoms that appeared to be COVID-like. I don't have it in front of me, apologies, but we did record information for people who was either shielding or who had absented themselves from work in terms of quarantine, because if you recall, towards the start of lockdown, there were a range of people whose medical conditions and personal conditions that they were required to absent themselves from work for normally 14 days. And some people with severe conditions actually for periods of a longer period than that, 3 months. So we do have that information, not in front of me, unfortunately, sorry. But no, the information in the report does relate to people who were specifically ill because of suspected COVID.
Thank you, David. I've got a question from Councillor Elliott for you.
It's not so much, thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, thank you, and to David for the report. As you know, I'm one of the lead members on the adult social care at County. We had a 3-4 hour meeting yesterday with Public Health about our COVID recovery scheme for the county, and be interesting to sit down with you and Alex and share some of that information about how we're planning recovery involving the districts, because we did discuss having conversation with all the districts. So if we can get that into our diaries, that'd be good. And just the other thing, the appendix to the sickness reasons for April 19 to 20. It'd be interesting to have a comparison to other. Do we compare that? Do we use any SIP for any? Do we compare it with anything else or other districts and how we're performing?
We don't compare ourselves with other districts in terms of that detail. We do have other information from districts in terms of overall absence rates. And it's, I suppose, a bit of an odd thing. I mean, if you look at it perhaps over a 5-year period, I think that we all take turns in doing better or worse, if I'm honest. Yeah. So the last time I met with the county group, the report back there was that for last year, absence rates have been much higher than had been expected. So, okay, that for the very end of that period, COVID would have been an issue. But for most of that time, it wouldn't have been. But the organisations were experiencing higher rates of absence than they were targeted for and expecting as well. I've not heard reasons for that, and I'm not quite sure when I spoke to colleagues that they understood reasons for either. I think with us, I would say that in terms of reasons for absence, we can look between years. And as I said, certainly absence because of anxiety, depression, stress have been either top or near the top for quite some time. As I say, it's not necessarily work-related stress or anxiety. But that doesn't really matter, I suppose. I mean, it's something which is, personal to the individual and affects them, but also family members and work colleagues around them as well. So we'd recognise it as being something that would be, damaging to an awful lot of people.
It may not be work related, but I think it's important that we do acknowledge that. And
yes,
we've got some. Do we have it in place to deal with mental health and in? Because obviously it's going to have an impact on work, isn't it? Yeah,
we absolutely does. Yes, and home life, and it's, as you say, it's pervasive, isn't it? So I mean, the simple answer is yes. I mean, we did have this support program in place that I spoke about, and that will be delivered once we're able to, return to whatever new normal is, and also some short-term measures that I outlined. But also we do have the employee assistance program, so that allows self-referral for a range of issues, and certainly in terms of support and support for mental health issues, then that is in place. Support would mean either telephone support or in some cases face-to-face counselling sessions as well. That at the moment might be more limited, but that's something which is open to all employees on a self-referral basis.
Because it's okay having a self-referral, but it's making that leap, isn't it? It's asking for help.
Absolutely, it is. Yes.
Yeah. It's
and
difficult
I suppose
for some people because some of our jobs are they're masculine, and to come and ask for help would be almost defeating.
It'd be seen as weak when it comes from a man. Yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem with mental health.
We're trying to say, mental health. So, as members, do we have anyone that champions mental health? No, I had this conversation 6-7 years ago, and I don't think we do we?
Well, I used to champion mental health, but over the last few years, Councillor Wheeler has kind of sort of took up that baton, if you like, as part of his portfolio. It was kind of a joint sort of a thing between myself and him, but he seems to have took the lead on it more than I have over the last few years.
If I can just jump in as well, Chair. So just to give some reassurance, it was quite interesting. The session that we had today with the supplier focused very much on that. So the online awareness. So it's not online training; it's online awareness. Very much focused on just that question about, suppose, the encouragement of people to talk. And I think you're quite right. I think in some ways, perhaps in some parts of the business, particularly, there might be more of a macho culture that would perhaps encourage people not to disclose or not to speak out. And certainly part of the package that we saw today focused just on that. And there's some sort of interesting stats around, I suppose, how people would respond to someone disclosing a mental health illness. And actually, it's not often met with derision. Actually, it's more often than not met with an understanding, because most people have experienced it within themselves or within family. So the package today was something I think we'd like to go forward with. And it's something that we could try to share, not just with people who have access to a computer at work, but more widely across the workforce as well, which I thought would be quite useful.
Some workshops.
The workshops I'm really keen to run again, but obviously at the moment it's kind of difficult with the current restrictions in place. So they were planned to happen, I mean, literally this last week, but it's just impossible physically to do those things. So they're very much sort of on the radar still. I've been in contact with that supplier to deliver those again once we're able to begin to meet safely in a shared space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions on item agenda number 4? Doesn't seem to be. I'd just like to add one thing, David, if that's all right, just to say, obviously I'm relieved, I'm sure every councillor is, that we've had no cases of COVID in the council. And we just, obviously, like everybody else, we want to pay gratitude to the hard work that staff have done during this difficult period of the council. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 5, please, David.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So again, it's an information item, and this relates to the gender pay gap information that we're required to produce in law. It's just a timing issue. It seems to have come quite quickly after the last time we presented this, but having missed a series of meetings, and also the last time the information being presented a little late, it seems to have come fast on the heels. But really just to give just an overview of the data that you can see on page 19. That's information that will be reported not only onto our own website and through our pay policy statement, but also onto the government's national database as well. That's a requirement in law. So the information, I suppose, is still good by industry standards. There's nothing that I'd point to tell you that it's an area of concern. The overall mean is slightly different to last year. We will have different reasons for that. Again, bear in mind that the data doesn't just include contracted employees, it includes casual employees at the snapshot date as well. So over a small workforce, the casual employees who have attended work over that period can actually skew things in a material way as well. I think what I'd say is that, and this is reflected in the narrative as well, that you'll see towards the end of the data. As an organisation, you'll know, because you sit here and listen to the policies that we try to put through. Policies that we have in place are designed to be primarily supportive in nature. We encourage flexible working, and in terms of the normal way of work, if you like, things we put into place include things like a really open flexi time scheme, for example. You'll recall several years ago we made changes to include, as part of the decision-making process when we look to fill vacancies, a consideration by senior leadership teams whether the job can be done flexibly as well. So there's a real challenge every time we have a vacancy to ask ourselves those questions. So what I would say is that the policies we have in place are supportive in nature, and designed to give ourselves a wide variety of, a pool of people that we can draw from as employees. And for that reason, I think that in part the figures are good figures. When you look at some of the private sector figures that are horrendous in terms of the gender pay gap, ours aren't. And pretty much across the 4 quartiles that you'll see, figures are fairly balanced, extremely well balanced in some of those, and the overall mean at just over 2.5% is very much within industry standards, and figure that I hope we'll be proud of.
Thank you, David. Any questions on agenda item number 5 for David? Okay, it doesn't seem to be. No one's indicated. The recommendation is just to note the report. So, thank you, David. Agenda item number 6, please, David.
Yeah. Sorry, and you have got me all evening. Sorry about this. It's there's normally a bit more variety, isn't there? But
no, that's a good job. We like you.
Yeah. Well. So this is just an agenda item, Chair, it's a standing item, just to report that since the last time that we met, there have been no minor staffing changes outside the full JCSC process. So just
Thank you very much, David. Moving on to agenda item number 7 then, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just an update here, actually. So when the papers were written and sent out, we understood that the National Pay Award was still an ongoing issue, something that was still under consultation. So update from the start of this week is that across the board now, so for NJC staff, so that's most employees, and also for JMC staff, which covers the Chief Executive and Chief Officers, all 3 groups have settled now and settled on an award of 2.75%. In addition to that, for the NJC employees, again, that's most of the workforce, there's a change to annual leave entitlement as well. So rather than there being a basic entitlement of 21 days, that's now increased to 22 days. So that will be a benefit to employees who are new to local government service, who have started within the last 5 years. So an increase to pay and an increase to basic holiday entitlement as well. That's probably the headline information. Secondly, Chair, 3.2 on the next page, page 24. I suppose it's just an update really to let you know about what's happening with things like the employee engagement group. So the Gedling group, that's made up of employees from across the council. And that's the group that puts together an awful lot of the programmes that employees can take part in. So I suppose social programmes you might describe in part, so things like quiz nights or trips, Christmas party, but also other events, so things like the employee awards as well, the things that take place at the end of the year, and the staff conference. You'll understand it's been a bit of a fallow year, or certainly since February. So although a lot of the events that we'd normally expect to take place haven't and really can't, the hope is to try to put together an award ceremony again around the end of December time, through Teams if we can't meet physically by then, and it I guess looks increasingly unlikely that will be the case, but actually to try and run a Teams-based event. So that we can do some things still, but maybe 1 or 2 of the events we'd expect have to be left just for this year. So that was probably the 2 things I was going to cover, Chair, but again, happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Is there any questions on this agenda item for David?
Alex, can you hear me?
Who's talking?
Helen.
Councillor Greensmith,
Helen
I think.
Greensmith.
Oh yeah, sorry, sorry, Councillor Greensmith. It's just you're not appearing on my screen.
Oh right, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Can I just confirm with you, David or Alex? Are you saying that the chief officers and the executive officers have also been awarded 2.75 pay increase? Is that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, right. Because at the bottom of page 23 it says no update.
No, it's a big apology. Sorry, no, and it really is hot off the press. So this is news from Monday, where the settlement came through. So it is for all of those groups. It's chief officers, chief exec, and the NJC for employees.
So everybody's got the same increase then.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That was
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, Councillor Greensmith. Okay, Councillor Thomas.
I just wanted to say that I'm quite happy to see that things like the Gedling group were still able to go ahead in some form, so to speak. I think it's nice to know that people have still had that connection.
Thank you. So we are meeting sort of virtually by Teams. It is there's less to talk about now, but we are trying our best with it. Oh.
Sorry.
So we are meeting by over Teams quite regularly still. So there's less to talk about, but we're doing our best to do a few things.
Good.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item number 8. I've got nothing that I consider urgent or been told about. We're just going to pause briefly because the next 2 items on the agenda, item 10 and item 11, are restricted items. So I just want to move item agenda number 9, exclusion of press and public. Anybody against it? All in favour? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in the background, there should be Kate. Can you hear me?